You and I stopped with second form Latin.
Well, it's going to get picked back up. It's on my to-do list.
It's on my to-do list, too. I'm
going to call that a bucket list, okay? I do have a bucket list.
I need to do it.
Welcome to the Homeschool Journal, a show that unpacks the joys and journeys of the classical homeschool family. Here's your host, Carrie McGraw.
Okay, friends, welcome to the Homeschool Journal today, where I have back with us Tanya Charlton, who is our curriculum director here at Memoria Press. Now, let me gloat on Tanya for just a minute.
Oh, don't.
Oh. Well, then I'll be gentle. Tanya is just one of these people that you love to spend time with, and she is so full of knowledge and wisdom and the history of Memoria Press and where we've come from, the history of Cheryl Lowe, our founder, and that is really important that we keep that alive, and Tanya is such a big part of that, and so I want to say thank you, Tanya, for all that you do.
Well, it was an accident.
I remember that. Now, if our friends will remember, we had you here, season 1, for Why Study Latin, but we're going to come at it a little bit differently today. We're talking about classical education can it be classical if we don't have Latin? So we're going to kind of reverse our order. But before we do, let's talk about your accidental stumbling into Mrs. Lowe when you were homeschooling your Nick and Tyler.
So I had 2 children who were in the 4th grade and the 1st grade, and our school system was terrible. And Tanya Berry, our friend Tanya Berry, found Cheryl Lowe in the basement of a church and told her daughter and me that we needed to go hear her. So we went. I fell for every word she said, enrolled my children in her little 1-day-a-week school, and somehow ended up teaching. That's another long story.
Yeah, that is a long story.
Ended up teaching. Then I moved over to the press, and she basically mentored me. I was in her Latin class for 2 years. And so she mentored me in teaching she just basically educated me because I didn't have a classical education, didn't even know what it was.
Well, me either. That's how I started, was researching and finding Mrs. Lowe.
Right. We all found Mrs. Lowe.
We all found Mrs. There's got to be, maybe that's a whole podcast on how we found Mrs. Lowe. But the focus of that is that Tanya has been with Mrs. Lowe from nearly the beginning, just so early in the development of Highlands Latin School, Memoria Press, this classical education journey that she grew for us, and you grew with her.
Yes, I'm very old.
Well, I'm not far behind, Tanya, so let's be honest. So today, like I said, we did a 2-part podcast in season 1 on why study Latin, and that was very full. We had to make 2 parts out of it. But today we're going to come at it from the opposite direction, which is, and I'm going to ask you this question and you can answer it. Is it classical without Latin?
No.
Thank you. End of podcast.
We're done.
We're done. Fastest podcast in the world. Okay.
I'm going to get out of this frigid room.
I'm so sorry.
And go back upstairs where there's heat.
Poor Tanya. But, it's... We laugh at that. We say quickly no, and it is a quick answer for those of us who have been so invested in classical education for so long, who've invested our children and our families in this, who've invested your life, and now your occupation in this.
And we shouldn't have to even say it.
Right.
It shouldn't even be a question. Latin was never separated from a classical education. It's a question because now, so many people are separating it, and it's never been separated before. But when other companies are saying you can have a classical education without Latin, so it's okay if you can't get to Latin, drop it. And then we are forced to say that's wrong.
No, right. And that's not what we believe of classical education.
Right.
And what we have worked and what Mrs. Lowe founded.
That's right.
So in this conversation, while we have families that watch and listen that have been with us for years, fully vested like we are, we also have new families. So this conversation is meant to take us through, why? Why would we say, no, you have to have Latin? Why is Latin such an integral part of a classical education? Now, for me, Tanya, to get to that answer, I kind of have to go backwards a little bit. I have to talk about, okay, let's understand what classical education is to get to the answer of why Latin is an integral part of it.
Sure.
So let's go there. What would Memoria Press say classical education is?
Can I read Cheryl's definition?
You can read anything you want.
So shortly before Cheryl died, she started writing a book on classical education. And I found it after her. I knew she was starting on it, and we knew she wouldn't finish it. But I did find this, and this is literally her short definition. The essential core of classical Christian education is the study of Latin and the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. Now, she always added when she was speaking, and Greek if you can get to it.
That's right.
And she goes on to talk about how it's been around for 2,500 years, never changed, always the same, invented by the Greeks, imitated and expanded by the Romans, preserved by the monks of the Middle Ages, had a rebirth at the Renaissance. And then in the middle of the 20th century, something happened and we dropped it. And then she goes on to say, I don't think we are at liberty to redefine it. I think that core has to be there in order to justify the word classical in classical Christian education, that Latin is an essential part of it. And I also like Tracy Lee Simmons' definition of a classical curriculum being grounded upon Greek and Latin and the study of the civilizations from which they arose. I love that word grounded, that it's grounded in it.
Well, that and what Mrs. Lowe has said, and we've spoken of before, about we are not at liberty to redefine this. I mean,
who do we think we are?
Thank you. Thank you. This was the education of thousands of years.
Right.
And the greatest thinkers, minds, orators, politicians, even into what we would consider modern day history. This was the education of our founding fathers.
Yes.
C.S. Lewis, Winston Churchill.
So many people.
So
because it was just the common education.
Right. And yet, like you said, in the early 20th century, we messed it up.
But we're bringing it back.
We're bringing it back, and that is part of the goal of Memoria Press. You know, our motto is saving Western civilization one student at a time. And for me, at the very core of her beautiful words and Tracy Lee Simmons as well, is the passing on for me of the culture of the Christian West. And that's what education needs to be, what it was. But if you look out in the world, that's not what we have.
Right.
But it's what we have. It's what Memoria Press has, right?
That's right.
And so I love that you brought up Tracy Lee Simmons. This is, and I'm sure that we will refer to his work again as we go through this conversation, but his book, Climbing Parnassus, which you brought with you, is one of the ones I would tell anyone to read.
It was my first book on classical education that Cheryl told me to read when she recognized that I knew nothing about it. And it was life-changing for me. I mean, it really did. I believed everything that she said, but it really did set the foundation for me to understand it better. And it's the first book I recommend to anybody who really wants to know more about classical education. And it is the 20th anniversary of Climbing Parnassus. So we're going to be celebrating that at our conference this summer. Yes.
In July, right.
Yes. So we're excited about that.
But one of the things that I've heard Martin say is that, classical education is a training in how to think and what to do. And to me, that's wisdom and virtue.
It's really sitting at the feet of giants. Like Alexander the Great sat at the feet of Aristotle. Like Demosthenes wanted to be a great orator, and he was a terrible speaker, and he copied the speeches of Thucydides eight times in order to learn. We've both done our famous Men of Greece. And I mean, that's what we're doing, is sitting at the feet of giants. And why would we reinvent that wheel? Why not take what they can give us and
continue to pass
it on, because it's so valuable. The mistakes that they made, the things they did well, what it means to be noble, to be virtuous. what it means to be a traitor.
Right.
All of those things are just packed in there.
I mean, to study virtue doesn't mean, it means that you're also studying the mistakes.
That's right.
And
hopefully won't make them again.
And that's part of passing on the culture, is understanding where we came from so that we see who we are and where we're going.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I worry about where we're going sometimes.
Well, we do worry about where we're going, but people have been there before. I want to also, I found this great quote. Excuse me while I flip through Climbing Parnassus.
But I love all the tabs in your book.
The point is, that one of the points he makes is that we're not alone. We realize when we study ancient civilizations that we're not alone. He says the history of the Greeks and Romans demonstrated with unfailing and discomforting consistency that we are not alone, that men and women have faced like predicaments before. And I think that's a huge part of it for me and for my children, was for them to recognize, I really appreciated that recognition that they're not alone, and that we are, just like in this world that doesn't have a history of mistakes and great feats. And, our founding fathers recognized that.
And used it in founding the nation.
Yes. Yes, they did.
And Latin is such a part of that. Latin gives us the opportunity to converse with the past. But also, and this gets a little bit further in the conversation, to converse with the present, in our Romance languages. Now that gets into why study language,
right.
Latin. We won't go there.
Right.
But Latin is one of those links to understanding we've done this before as a people. What did we learn the first time around? And if we don't take those lessons,
right.
where are we ending up?
I have this great little excerpt from Climbing Parnassus where he loves Homer, and he talks about Homer kind of going out of favor for a few centuries. And then in the 1870s at Eton, they brought him back and started reading them. And I love this, and I've used this before, that Tracy said, Homer said high things beautifully. But then he goes on to make the point that when these students started reading Homer again, and they had all of the stories and all of the things that Homer taught through the stories of the Iliad and Odyssey, that he basically had given a vocabulary to all the young men about their agonies during World War I. So he takes it back to those soldiers who had read Homer, and they're sitting in those trenches, and they're watching people be killed all around them, but they've got that common manhood with Homer and all of his characters. And I thought that was a really good way.
And they feel an ancestry.
A real connection between the past and the present. I thought that was really powerful.
And I think that that's part of, why do we pass on the culture of the Christian West? Why is that so important? If we say that is what a lot of what classical education is, which is passing on the culture of the Christian West, why is that so important? Well, that's exactly what you're pointing to. Is it's not just important as a culture and as a society; it's important as an individual.
Yes, and I really feel like that's a gift we've given our children.
I do too.
I really do. I am so thankful that they have that gift, and they bring things up. They remember.
They do
all those
more
characters and those things that happened, and
they make connections.
Yes,
even the young ones, being on like the Facebook families group for our Memoria Press families. Parents talk about the connections even their young ones make.
It's so fun,
right? So we've talked a lot about classical education, what it is, and I want to say thank you for letting me take us there, because I feel like it's you've got to have that foundation to understand where Latin fits in,
right?
So let's come back to, if we say that you can't have classical education without Latin, we are distressed as moms, as a company, that others are saying, oh, sure, you can kind of put it on the side burner. We're saying no and yelling it from the rooftops. Where does Latin fit in, Tanya, to all of this?
Ultimately, our goal is for our students to be able to read primary authors in Latin. And that was Cheryl's goal. When she started her little cottage school that exploded, that wasn't her goal. Her goal wasn't to have a school with 700 students. It was that everybody needed to study Latin and to be educated. And you truly weren't if you didn't. Because you needed to get to the point in high school where you could read authors in their original language. And those great authors were writing in Latin. So if you didn't have Latin, then you wouldn't ever be able to read them. And so she thought they needed to start really young in order to get there, to be able to do it. And we've done it. You know, our students read Cicero and Caesar and Ovid, and, you know, the culmination is Virgil's Aeneid.
Right.
So we get there, but it's a lot of years of Latin. But that really is the ultimate goal. There, you know, we've got the other podcast that tells you all the many reasons why.
That's right.
But it really is, to be classically educated would be to be able to not read a translation of those authors, but to read them in their original text. Yes.
And again, but in so doing, I'm going to go back to the same, I'm going to harp on the same point. You're connecting through Latin to history. You're connecting to the past.
That's right.
And yes, there are so many, and I don't want to get into the reasons why I study Latin because we did a 2-part podcast on that.
It's hard not to.
Everybody go back and listen to that one, please. Right. Find season 1 and go back and listen to these incredible reasons that we laid out, as to why. But, and they are part of the, why is it such an important part of classical education? But those original texts, thank you for bringing that up. It's also, and this is part of the reason why she said, start young. It's really the original critical thinking skill.
It is. It absolutely is. It forms the mind. It puts, she always said, little cubbies in your mind, because it really is training your brain.
I have said file drawers.
It's so hard. I mean, it is so. When I tried to do, when I was in her Latin class, when she would call on me to parse a word, I would have to literally go in my head through the entire, like if it was a noun, through the entire declension till I got to the part that would be my ending. And it just really, she would just shake her head and laugh because the students could do it like that.
Right.
But my brain was older. My brain cells were dying.
Well.
and I literally had to go through, it's like a puzzle, but it is so structured and so disciplined that it makes the perfect hard thing to study.
Well, and hard things are good things.
They are good things.
And we do hard things.
And if you can translate the Aeneid, you can do anything.
Well, I'll admit I'm not there.
No, me neither. I don't think I'm going to get there.
But we have had, and our parents are seeing, and they understand the wisdom of wanting that for their children.
Yes.
That's something else too. And you said this early on. Neither you nor I had any clue what classical education was until we were seeking for our own children that truth, that goodness, and that beauty that classical education brings, and Latin, being that grammatical structure, that language of truth. It's like math.
Well, it is like math, and people call us all the time and say, my child hates Latin, and so we're going to stop. They may hate math, but you don't stop math. So why would you stop Latin?
Right.
If you really believe that in order to be truly educated, you need that background.
So if a parent asks, how far do we really go?
And different people get further than others. Obviously, you and I stopped with second form Latin.
Well, it's going to get picked back up. It's on my to-do list.
It's on my to-do list, too.
What do we call that? I'm going to call that a bucket list. Okay, I do have a bucket list.
I need to do it. I don't know why I told Mitchell I'd take that Greek class. That was crazy. I'm not ready for Greek.
We talk about, and you said this, it's a hard thing to do.
It is, and not everybody's going to translate. And my children were not good Latin students. They didn't. My children, neither one of them got to the Aeneid. They translated Caesar and Cicero because they were forced. But they didn't do it well. Mm-hmm. But still, it was of benefit to them.
Amen. I mean, I'm in the middle of it right now. My 9th grader is in Caesar.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you, it's not a lot of
it's not fun
right now.
Right.
but
the joy of accomplishing it, mm-hmm. and just knowing that, you have to, as a parent, to be bought in to the value of it.
Amen.
Or you're not going to be able to continue it on.
No. And you're not going to be able to articulate it to your child.
That's
as well.
Right.
And they need to hear that. They need to hear there is value to the hill that you are climbing.
Yes.
And they need to be reminded of it several times throughout the school year.
Yes.
There is great value. So, again, you have shared some quotes. Let me share one. And this one kind of goes back a little bit, but it is another Tracy Lee Simmons. If y'all can't tell, this is like
the Tracy Lee Simmons fan
show.
Club.
Yeah, right. I think we've called this our Bible of classical education,
yes.
right? Okay, I'm not trying to. No,
really
the Bible comes first.
Me.
The Bible comes first. But and this is something from his book that struck me. It says, "Here we see that a key purpose of education is a fundamentally conservative or preservative one. Education should preserve and transmit the past so that cultural memory is lengthened, and so that descendants will not be left to rediscover human truths already endured and expressed by eloquent forebears." Now, I can't put anything that eloquently, that's for sure, but Tracy Lee Simmons can.
Which is why we quote him.
That's right. Why you have all the
we're
tabs
not
in your
reinventing
book. We're not reinventing the wheel.
There's no reason to. He said it so well.
Today, we're just hoping to help our homeschool parents articulate why Latin, why
and another
classical education.
Let me read one of Cheryl's that I find really good, too, about why. She says, a classical education is a superior education. It gives students the background needed to understand the modern world. Mm-hmm. Without this background, our people are tossed about by any new idea.
Oh, heavens.
For they have been given no wisdom from the past to prepare them to act wisely in the difficult task of discerning the present and future. Isn't that great?
Is it possible to make a button out of that one? Can you just wear
tossed about by any new idea?
I might have to take that, stick it in my wallet, and just hand it out when people ask.
That's right. That's right. And then I've got this little handwritten. Look at that.
Oh, how beautiful.
And it's just a note. Like, this page is full of notes. Can they see this?
Yes,
I mean, it's just literally full of notes that are random. They aren't really, I've just got so many of these little, sound bites. But this one, she says, what prepares students for the future is not what is new, but what is old and changeless, the permanent, timeless things that never change. It is these things that never change that prepare you for a rapidly changing world. For they never change, and the new and fashionable soon become old and outdated.
Absolutely. I would say to parents that are discovering classical education or, still in the early years, it's not just the new thing to do. This is timeless.
It is.
And it connects us with our forebears. So let's go into and finish out here with some hope, some words of wisdom, some words of encouragement to our families who are in the trenches, okay? Going back to our World War, veterans and your story on Homer. Our families are in the trenches. Let's just paint this story. They're either having to convince an older child to get through it. They're starting it off with a younger child. They're in the middle of it with,
they don't
a fourth
know
or
it.
fifth grader. They don't know it. Mm-hmm. They're watching maybe the videos as they go. They're learning as they go. They're trying to pre-read the lesson, and here what we have said is the ultimate goal would be to read the original text. But Tanya, what if you can't get there?
That's okay. And not everybody does get there. But anything at all that you do with Latin is of benefit. And so you may not translate Virgil, but your student is going to understand what an organized language looks like. And there's so many benefits that are in the other podcast. I keep wanting to spit them out, but I know that's not what this is. But it really is. Any Latin that they do is beneficial, and it's worth sticking to. I mean, my son's Henley book every other page says, I hate Latin. He was...
I have some of that too.
I kept that.
I kept him too.
He literally hated it for the 10 years that he took it. And it was a battle. But, you have to choose your battles. And that for me was non-negotiable.
That's right.
But part of the reason it was non-negotiable is because it was non-negotiable for Cheryl Lowe. Mm-hmm. And so I was lucky that I had her pushing me to, it meant so much to her. And she was so passionate about it. And truly believe that you had to have it to be educated.
For those of us who are under her wings, yes. She just pulled us along. So
that's a huge advantage. And I feel the burden of trying to pass that on and have that kind of dedication to that message.
Well, that's why I started with a big old tout on Tanya, because you are carrying that on.
Well, I'm trying. I'm not Cheryl Lowe, though, by any means.
So this hard thing that we're asking families to do, and sometimes it's easy and it is joyful. It's not that there's not joy in it.
Love it.
Right.
Why didn't I get one of those students?
Oh, well, I got 2. I'm at 50%.
Well, that's better than I did.
But, this thing that can have great joy because of accomplishment, we said that, but it is a hard thing. There's value, as we've said, in doing something hard.
Absolutely.
So our final encouragement to our parents, what would you want to say?
Well, I want to quote Tracy Lee Simmons one more time. Can I quote him one more time? Bryce, you can cut whatever you want to, but I just can't say it as well as he does. He says, and this helped me in those years, anything worth knowing comes to be known at a price, often an exacting one paid over many years. The consequences reach far. People have a common culture. We're giving our students a common culture with their ancestors and making that connection that as I get older, see is so important. Is to have that connection with the past.
I'm going to say, when I was a young mom, I wouldn't have... That wasn't on the list of priorities.
Oh, me neither.
I was happy to get through the lessons for the day.
Yes.
And the laundry. And maybe the floor got swept while the baby was, crawling all over it. I mean, that wasn't what I was thinking. But you're right. Now, at the stage that I'm at, I can look back and go, thank you, God. Thank you that you put Cheryl Lowe in my path. Thank you that you opened me up to classical education. Thank you that you opened my family and my children up to Latin. I've not gone far enough, I will admit that, but it is a matter of praise and thanksgiving for me that this has been part of the rearing of my children. As we finish out today, I just want our parents to hear it may be hard, but it is worthy. And it is that connection with the root of our culture, the root of our language. And you cannot have classical education without Latin.
That's right.
Tanya, thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Thank you. It was fun.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today. If you liked our episode, click the thumbs up button below or leave a comment to let us know what you thought. It always helps us to know if we've helped you. You can also click the bell icon and subscribe to the show so that you can stay in touch. Then I'd love for you to share it with a friend. We have many resources here on this channel, so I hope you'll check those out too. I'm Carrie McGraw. Thanks for listening today, and I'll see you next time.